Yeah, I mean, I've been real lucky. Um, where, I had started off at DeFranco's and I wasn't really making a really good living there. And I mean, it was, it was I was walking away with less than half of what I generated, and I had my own clientele there. Um, like a
Tough
lot
when you
less
know
than
the numbers like that, though, too.
what's that?
It's tough when you know the numbers, too. Like,
Yeah, like that doesn't bother me as much, but for some reason, like and when Joe decided to move the gym to Austin, um, and I gotta be honest with you, I was content with making $50,000 a year for the rest of my life. My dad was like, "Yo, you're out of your fucking mind." My dad's like, "You're an idiot." Um, but I was content with that. I was content with being Joe's number two for my career. And if I didn't do that, I'd go and I'd train under like Buddy Morris or something and be his number two. Like I never really wanted to be like a number one kind of guy. And then when Joe moved his gym to Austin, I'd said to Joe, he asked me if I wanted to go. I was like, no, I'm not going to Austin. I'm a Jersey guy. I said, how about we just open up a gym here and we just split it 50-50. I was like, I'll do all the training and you just do your DVDs, your training out of here, your
yeah,
certifications. And he said, yeah. I was like, awesome. And then a couple of weeks leading up to it, it ended up falling through. So I was like kind of on my ass and I had this great clientele, like a decent enough clientele. And I was sitting waiting. I was like, maybe I just wait for Buddy to call or wait for a college gig, or do I just start my own gig, start my own gym? So I started my own gym, had a client base, and I was seeing all the money. And I had like no overhead because I bought all my equipment used and I paid $1,000 a month for rent. And then I had another coach with me that was from DeFranco's that, I mean, Joe closed the gym. He had nowhere to go. I was like, all right, just come with me. So like he almost paid my rent, the first year.
yeah,
So I was like, holy shit, like this isn't that bad. And then I had a really good product, uh, and I cared a lot, and I was in a good area. And on top of it, I had a bunch of pro guys that I had trained because even when I was at Joe's, I was training most of the people at that
yeah.
time. I was his head guy there, or his main guy, or whatever. Yeah, I think I was like director of sports performance, whatever title we gave me to make me feel good.
Who does number two work for?
Yeah, like, and I mean, I hit the ground running. So the money was never an issue for me. Uh, One, because I always lived well below my means. I did the numbers one time and I lived off of $26,000 a year. And I did that for like 10 years. Like just recently, since I bought a house, did that number go up?
Yeah,
So I don't need a lot to live. I always joke, had I not met my wife, I mean, my apartment was essentially, you know, a couple of lawn chairs in front of a TV. And it was never on because I was never there. And if I was there, I was working. I wasn't watching TV.
yeah.
So for me, I live well below my means. So for me to be able to pay my coaches substantially better than I got paid was always easy. And I've had coaches make more money than me for years. I have one coach in particular that made more money than I did. I'm in business 10 years now. I think he made more money than I did for 8 of them, 7 of them. And I'm okay with that. Like I didn't care. And I was always working real hard, and always saving money. And now my goal is to have all 3 of my coaches make over $100,000 a year. I'm like, I'm close enough. Like I'm pretty close to that number with 2 of them. And then the one is, we're going to be on our way there probably within the next 2 years. He'll be hitting that, and
It's
and
awesome.
yeah. And I
So
mean,
you're
like
talking careers. You're not talking jobs. You're talking careers for people.
well, yeah. So this is the other thing. I have a lot of people that want to come and work at my gym, and I could be making a lot more money because they'd bring their own clientele. And for me, it'd be free money because I'd charge them, whatever the VIG would be, whatever the rate,
Yeah,
50-50, and everyone would probably be thrilled with that. But if the product isn't there and the relationship isn't there, like if I don't want to spend 10 years with you, you know what I mean? Like if I don't see that, like there's no point in us spending 10 minutes together. Um, so it all my coaches want to be exactly where they are. Like there's no place they'd rather be. Like they want to coach at Freak Strength. They want to coach with me. They want to be a part of what we're doing. Like they believe in it. It's you know, never stop learning. Genuinely fucking care. Like that's
Yeah.
who that's so. Our core tenets: be the best, never stop learning, genuinely fucking care, and fuck you. Like it's because a lot of us been wronged, and we're trying to push it back in someone's face. You know,
Yeah.
our goal is to be the best in the area. Like I don't care about, I saw when I was at the Francos, we got rated like a top 10 gym in the world, top 5 gym in the country year after year. And like, what did it do? Like, it really didn't do anything for anyone's pockets. And I said, dude, I'd rather be the best gym in Bergen County than the best gym in the world. So that's
Yeah.
my goal. And I live in the second richest county in the country. So like, that's where my gym is. Like, I think we'll do okay.
Yep.
And, my goal is to get our gym to over $1 million in revenue. And between 4 coaches, 5 coaches, like as long as I keep my overhead low, which I'm really good at doing this year, it's going to go up because we're going to expand. But I mean, everyone will be sitting pretty. And I mean, everyone is in this for their career. Like all my coaches, like this isn't a fad. They're all over 30. I'm almost 40. One of my coaches is over 40. Like everyone's been doing this for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And it's like our goal is to do this when we're 50, 60 years old, do exactly this, like enjoy this, because like we didn't get into this to be millionaires. We did this because we love it. But how can you sustain this lifestyle is by making a certain amount of money and we all have conversations about, lifestyle and how to live and staying within our means and stuff as well. So it's like we can all be on the same page and no one's really, really hurting that bad, So we all have that common goal, the common plan, family, house, security. And as long as we stay on the same page and no one gets too greedy, like this is a can't lose situation for us.
Do you think, because I mean, if you listen to a lot of podcasts now, tons of people say, like, going the college route, like you gotta work for a long time and make little with like virtually zero security if that's the way you want to go. Because coach gets fired, you're gone too. Do you think more coaches will end up going the private route? Because
So
it's like in college, everybody thinks like, oh, I want to be a D1 strength coach. If you ask people, right? But then like as time goes by, I remember thinking this in my head, like I want to do that. I'm like, you know what? I'll work at a place, a sports performance place close to my house to start off to get some experience, and then I'll go that route. And then as time goes by, I'm like, I don't want to move. I don't want to jump all over. Like, I just want to stay here.
so it depends. I actually just had Nick DeMarco on our podcast. We just talked about this. And he's at Elon. He's got his PhD, or he needs to defend his thesis now, or whatever, his dissertation, whatever the hell he's got to do. He's like that close to getting his PhD,
Yeah.
and he's the assistant athletic director at Elon. And he's had jobs, bigger jobs, and he's like, "No, I'm good." Like he's had the offers, and I think as long as your aspirations are to continue rather than to go to SEC or to go to, whatever the Power Five is. As long as your aspirations are just to continue doing what you're doing, you make a very good living uh, staying put and developing and getting some roots and developing relationships at just about any school. The problem is we're always looking for that next best thing because we're trying for whatever level. We're trying either for the paycheck which will always be there, as long as, and to be honest, bro, like I had a financial goal and I talked to someone about that goal. He's actually the CEO of Gym Launch. His name is Cale Owen.
Oh, I listened to that episode.
He's the best.
Yeah.
He's really, really, really good. I really like him. I really like their company. They do a really good job. And he and I talked, and I mean, the amount of money that I live off of every year, he goes, "Well, why do you have that goal?" I was like, "Because it's a security blanket." He goes, "Yeah, but you live so low beneath that. Like for you to make the interest, to live off the interest, you technically need to make a third of that money, right? So like,
Yeah.
why don't you just make the goal, the third of what you're trying to do? Because like, I mean, bro, like I drive my wife's Jetta, like I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't care. I got money in the bank. Um, I could pay off my house if I wanted to, but my interest rate is so low, I don't. So like I don't live I don't live extravagantly. So, it's I you can, and to answer the other part of the question, yes, I absolutely think more strength coaches should be in the private sector. And I think more will make the move. They just don't know how. And that's one of the reasons why I'm making a push to become more popular on social media, because my following is primarily strength conditioning coaches. Even though I'm not a strength coach, I have more of that mindset and most of them follow me. Uh, and I know a lot of them are miserable. So I want to let them know, like, hey, with some of my content, it ain't that hard. You could pull it off. It just, you can do this. I think that's an important thing for them to learn. But like, there's certain skills that they have to acquire that they don't need in strength conditioning, like sales, marketing, low budgeting, like things that you have been an idiot to, like you very,
Yeah.
very ignorant to, like you need to learn, but it's not that tough. Like it's real, it's simple stuff. You just need to do it. So I think as long as people have a mindset of living below their means and they don't need the Mercedes and they don't need the BMW and the fancy multi-million dollar house and stuff, you can do very, very well just saving an extra 10 grand a year, and then eventually in 5-10 years make a down payment on the house and then slowly pay that off and continue to live below your means, and then your kids will be able to save for college and all that. You just need to see, it all depends on what you value. And that's the biggest thing, is like I think our value systems are off, because it's like, what are we valuing? Are we valuing walking out in front of the SEC crowd and having everyone cheer? But like, we ain't the fucking star. The stars are over there, so they ain't cheering for the strength coach.
No.
you know or is our goal to help every single person that's in front of us? And like, that's my goal. Like, and dude, like I've trained guys that have gone to the Super Bowl. I've had the opportunity to go to 3 Super Bowls, and I've declined them. um and it's guys that I've had playing in them, like everything be paid for, like I wouldn't have to pay for anything. And I said, no, I'm good. I have a better view from my couch. Like I've trained those guys and it's fun. And I've had guys, go from getting cut to winning Super Bowls and having 10-year NFL careers. And I have a couple of guys that'll be potential Hall of Famers and or future Hall of Famers in multiple sports. Um, and I have just as much fun training, the out of shape soccer mom, or some kid that's trying to make a team. It's and I've trained celebrities too. I've trained I mean, very, very high name, big, A-list celebrities, and they smell like shit just like everyone else when they sweat. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's the same person. So it doesn't matter, as long as, even if you're at a low level Division 3, stay there. Like, I don't like, as long as pay's good enough and you're gonna have like the slow level, you got benefits, you'll have a pension. Like, what are we talking about? Like, you could live the life that you want to live exactly where you are. Just stay the course and they'll never fire you, because you have so much job security. I think there's an approach that's missing there, when rather than using places as stepping stones, like, how about you actually develop it, and how about you develop your brand there and really lay some things down. Now, there are absolutely schools that no matter what, they're never going to pay the strength coach more than 45 grand a year. Like, I get that. And sometimes you just got to move on from that. But like, if there's an opportunity to be treated like a state employee, like just like a regular teacher,
Yeah.
and grow over time and develop a pension, and man, I just put in the time, bro, and do good quality work, and you'll never leave. I don't know. I have a much different perspective on things than a lot of people, I think.
Well, I think too, like for me, my favorite people to train are the people that put in an effort. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, so like one of my favorite clients, I just trained her this morning. Like I've trained her for like 15 years. She's like a 58-year-old woman. Like I love training this person. And it's a great time. She works super hard. And I'm like, this is like sometimes the big jobs and the big athletes are overrated in the sense of it really comes down to just the relationships you build with them and whether they put in the work. Just because they're great doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be fun to train.
Well, there's no correlation with that. How
Yeah.
good they are and how cool they are. Um, so and you know, I've been courtside, I've been field side, you know, like you name it, and you name the sport. If they're twats, you don't want to train them. It doesn't matter. You know, I've almost kicked out. I've had fist fights. I've almost kicked out future Hall of Famers. You know, like if you don't want to deal with them, it just ain't worth the headache. I mean, I've had sleepless nights worried about stupid shit that really have nothing to do with me because I'm so wrapped up in all the things that they don't care about.
Yeah.
You know, like it's what are we talking about? Like I'm more concerned about your sleep than you are. Like we're tracking your HRV, we're tracking your sleep data, and we're worried about, you know, X, Y, and Z, and you're smoking weed and drinking wine before bed. Like, guy, what the fuck am I working for?
Yeah.
Why do I care more about this than you? Or like you have the balls to go out drinking all night long when we have a high intensity day, when we have sprints and we're 4 weeks out of season. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why do I care about this more than you? So, to be honest with you, a lot of my favorite people to train are the ones that don't give a fuck and it doesn't matter. Because then it's like, yo, bro, I was out all night. Like, all right, dude, like, let's hop on the bike. Let's go through some fucking stretches. Let's make you like not puke today. How about that? Like
Yeah.
those are some of my favorite people to train. It's just like the slobs that come in and they're like, bro, my fucking cholesterol is terrible. Like I think a lot of them they're so much fun because it doesn't matter. And all that matters is that they show up. And as long as we have a good enough rapport, they're going to keep showing up. And it's better
Yep.
than what they would do if they weren't here. You know,
100%.
some of those guys are my favorites. And some of them they drive me up a fucking wall. But like, yeah, dude, I it's the relationships to me are the best part. And if you could positively influence someone and put them on a better trajectory than when they first met you or before they met you, like that's a fucking W. You know, so it doesn't matter who you train. It's like what you do with them and how you help them.
For sure. I did want to get into some training related questions here too. Um, but I think those conversations though are super important to have just to get people thinking about like what do you really want in life? Because I forget who probably a million people have said it, but it's like, what do you value? And then is the way you're living like matching what you value? And a lot of the time it's not. Like you're like, oh, if this is really the most important thing to me, then I got to rearrange some stuff in my
That's
life.
what Kale talked about on the podcast. That's what he talked
Yeah,
about. He was big into that. And he said, when I said what should a strength coach consider when he wants to make the jump going into the private sector? And because I wanted to direct a lot of that podcast towards the strength coaches trying to help themselves and the gym owners and the trainers trying to help themselves and see what they want to go. And he says, you need to decide what's actually valuable to you. What's valuable to me? Is it my family? Is it being able to go out to dinner whenever the hell I want? Which is totally cool. You know what I mean? Like whatever your value system are,
Yeah.
is you need to make sure that your actions are aligned with that value system. And if they're not, like you need to reevaluate. You need to redo some shit. And not enough people are willing to admit what they actually value.
So true. I want to go. You said something on a podcast with Cam Joss where now you were a collegiate All-American. So you reached what I assumed was the goal. But you had said too, like you could do a 54-inch box jump, but you couldn't like dunk off of one leg.
Mhm.
You were powerful off of two legs. And thinking about that, I was like, would you go back and train any differently? Like knowing what you know now, or would you say, you know what, I actually did like reach the pinnacle of what I could have done. Would I do it differently?
So this is a deep question because when I was in college and when I was in high school, I had a different personality. Uh, I was I was a motherfucker. Like I was a tough guy. I got in fist fights. Like, I was known like when I was in college, I was a crazy white boy. Like that's everyone just steered clear of me. So lifting heavy, lifting my balls off, puking, fucking motherfucking myself, punching myself in the face, like that was part of that part of training was part of who I am. Like I remember my freshman year of college, I hit over 400 and like I was really, really good even as a freshman, and I struck out. I barely ever struck out in college. Um, I struck out in a big part, a drop third strike. I sprinted down to first base and I punched myself in the face, like after being out, getting called out. I gave myself concussion. Like I was an idiot, So
Yeah.
the way I train now versus how I trained then, would I change it? I don't know. It added years to my career for sure, no doubt. But I mean, sometimes I wonder, was that part of what made me great was my intensity, or was that something that held me back? Um, I mean, we could say it held me back all we wanted, but I was a career 400 hitter in 4 years, and three-time or two-time All-American and Hall of Famer in the college, and I had all the records before COVID came by, and 6-year
Yeah.
players broke them. That's how good my records there were. Like it took guys playing 6 years to break them. So depending on the personality, right? Like it's what I did wasn't. I mean, shit. Maybe it was bad, but it fucking worked. Maybe it wasn't optimal, but it worked. Are there aspects that I would train? Yeah, for sure. Uh, I would make myself way more reactive, elastic, way faster. We do a lot more speed training than I did then. Uh, I would do a lot more reactive work, um, different types of plyos. But as far as like the heavy lifting goes, I there are some things that I just needed to do, uh, and I would absolutely talk myself back with a couple of lifts here and there. But man, I don't know. It's a tough combo because how do you tell someone that just, I mean, this back then there was something called Beezer certified, BESR certified bats.
I know.
And
I
when
so I played college baseball. I know exactly what you're talking
oh,
about. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So when the ball came off the bat faster than 110 miles an hour, the bat would dent. Like that was part of the certification, would break the bat. Every single time I made contact with the ball, the bats would dent. I had a liquid metal. Like that's how hard I hit the ball. And I can guarantee you there wasn't a stronger college baseball player in the era that I played. Like I was 190 pounds, squatting well over 500, benching 365, doing 50 pull-ups, deadlifting over 600, maybe I think 630. box jumping 54 inches. You know what I mean? So like it did what it was supposed to. Dude, some of my speed squats were outrageous. I was doing speed squats my senior year, doing speed squats with like 350 and moving the motherfucker.
That's insane. Yeah.
You know, but I mean, was I in the wrong sport is the question, you know? Um, but so I don't know the answer to that. I know that I would think that I'd change a couple of things here and there, but I don't know. It's so tough because it worked. So I can't argue with that. It hurt me.
Yeah.
It absolutely led to my demise, but it worked.
Yeah. And like before I thought of that question, that was kind of my initial thought was like, it did the job. It did what it was supposed to do. You know, it wasn't the most ideal thing ever, but it did what it was supposed to do. Yeah.
So like, what the hell are you supposed to say to that? You know,
Yeah.
don't, I don't know. For all the faults in my training, shit worked.
I know. Cause like when I think back, like, I think that was the missing thing. I didn't have, we didn't have a strength coach in college. I don't
Where'd you
even
play?
know who, University of Scranton. So like just a small Division III school. Um, honestly, I don't even know who wrote up our workouts, but like I really didn't know anything. And I felt like I could have just with a little bit of guidance could have gotten so much more, even if it wasn't ideal,
Mhm.
but there was just none. Um, so like I wish I would get a redo, uh, for sure. Um,
You still play at all?
actually all I play now is ball hockey, which is just like hockey, but you're running instead of skating. And I'll tell you what, I absolutely love it. Like we play in tournaments like all over the East Coast or whatever. I'm the oldest guy on my team and running with like these 22, 23-year-old kids. Honestly, it keeps me in great shape. It gives me something to train for, and I absolutely love it. Um, and people they're like, "Oh, it's what you do in gym class or whatever." I don't care. Like it's 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 fun. Um, you bring up a lot of your questions on your podcast involve acceleration. And I know you had Ryan Hopkins on. So I'll ask you the same question I had asked him at one point. Which split of a 40 do you care the most about, or in terms of like, do you think you can learn the most from? If you're looking at like 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. Um, and it's funny, like when I had asked him that, his initial thought was 20 to 30. And I had said my gut was 10 to 20. And now I might be a little biased because I only have like 30, 35 yards max in our parking lot before it gets a little sketchy. Um, but neither of us said the 30 to 40 or the 0 to 10, which was kind of interesting. But
So,
I'd like to hear your thoughts.
so my thoughts on that is it depends. What am I looking for? Um, who am I doing it on? If it's a baseball player, I don't give a fuck about, 20 to 30. And
Yeah.
because he ain't running 30 yards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's running 30 yards to first base, but if like that's it. That's it. And if he's stealing a bag, he's running 20 yards and sliding because he's got a 3 yard lead, and
Yep.
then he's got a 3 yard slide or whatever the hell, you know? So like, man, like it depends. Is it an offensive lineman? Is it the guy with a knee injury? Is it a guy with a hamstring injury? Is it a guy that we're like true raw speed and he's a skill player versus, like it all depends. Is it a receiver? Now, what kind of receiver is it? Is this a slot receiver? Is it a deep receiver? Is it a tight end? If it's a tight end, I only care about the 10 yards. If it's a slot receiver, I only care about the 10 yards. If it's a deep guy, like maybe I care about the 10 to 20 or the 20 to 30.
Yeah.
To the special teams guy. So what can I learn the most about? It all depends on what I need to know. And dude, I mean, it's like a horrible answer. It gives you no information. But like I know if I have a guy with a knee issue or I have a guy with a lower back issue or hip issues, I learn a fuck ton from the first 3 steps.
Yeah.
I know a ton just by looking at the first couple of steps and depending on which foot, right foot forward, left foot forward. I can tell right away, is it a strength issue? If it's not a strength, is it a muscular strength issue? Is it a tendinous issue? Is it, like it's if we have a weakness issue, an actual strength issue with, let's say, the glute, well, then you're going to see the knee valgus, on the first couple of steps because that's strength, because the glute's not going to be very tendinous. So its job is to stop it from valgusing, that glute med, right?
Yeah.
So it all depends on what it is that I'm trying to correct at what point. So I have a tight end that had a sesamoidectomy. And the first couple of steps with him were huge at first.
Yeah.
At first, they were huge because he couldn't generate the power until he got going. And then once we got that stronger, then from yards 15 to 22-ish, his foot actually couldn't take the ground reactive forces associated with the angles that he was at, because we weren't getting to top speed angles, but we were acceleration angles, but not deep acceleration angles, and more force than the deep acceleration angles. You know what I mean? So it's like it all depends. And I could see on our graphs that the charts were on the charts that the graph would kind of like pitter off a little bit, which means like he wasn't finishing his stride, or like he wasn't absorbing his stride. The amortization was slightly off. Or a guy with a hamstring issue. Hammies don't give a shit about the first 10 yards.
Nope.
So like, well, how are we going to test this son of a bitch? So it all depends. It really all depends on what it is that I'm looking for. If I'm looking pure acceleration of a skill athlete, what do I care most about? DB. If I care about developing acceleration, I think with a cornerback, because they're always going to be reactive, the reactive elastic qualities that they have are always going to be superior to their strength. Usually, they're typically going to be, and I shouldn't say, they're typically superior. I'd focus a little bit on the first 10 yards, because that first step, reacting, hitting it, that first step or two, I'd really focus on that. So maybe the first 3 steps is something that I'd really look at, and I'd try to quantify everything and try to improve those metrics. Does that answer that question at all?
It does. Well, I think too, like the way I thought about it was, if I look at someone's 10 to 20 and they're hitting certain numbers, they couldn't hit those numbers without having a good first 10, almost. Like you can't have a really slow, but then like elite. But I think about it too, like I've seen a lot of people, and I've seen more people, I would say, like this way, where they have a good first 10, but they kind of just like stay there after that. Like they can't continue to pick up the speed that I would like to see them have sometimes. But I think like the main thing that you kind of think about is really like actually looking at all of these splits and thinking like they all mean something. And it's like you said, like, what do you want to get out of that? And it's looking at each of those things.
So that was a lesson that took me years to learn. Was a good 10 doesn't equal a good 20, doesn't equal a good 30, doesn't equal a good 40.
Yeah.
Just because you have a good 10 doesn't mean it's setting you up right. I've had guys run big. I've had linemen run 1.6s, 1.7s, and running 5 flats and over flat 5s. Whereas I've also had receivers running 1.6s and running 4.4s.
Yeah.
So how does that add up? So a good 10 doesn't equate to a good 40, and a good lean, or excuse me, I shouldn't say a good lean. And a lean of an exit angle of 44.5 degrees or 45 degrees doesn't always equal an elite start or an optimal start, right? And it's all about where you want to go. So if you're going 10 yards, like, okay, cool, a good 10 matters. If you're going 40 yards, you're going to want to slow that 10 and develop the 10 to make sure it sets you up for the right 20, to make sure it sets you up for the right 30 and the right 40. It's chess. It's not like as maximal output as you would think, like big strides, like grit. You can get a very, very fast 10 by overstriding. Cannot get a fast 40 by overstriding.
Yep. I had a guy this summer. He's probably like 6'4". His 10 was, if you just looked at the time, you didn't watch him, you'd say, oh, that's a decent 10. Then you're watching him, you're like, what is that? Like, but yeah, it is true. All right, let's say, like, let's talk about that tight end you mentioned. Let's say is first, say he does improve his first 10, but then you see that next split not be what you want it to be. How would you train that 10 to 20 versus like any other segment? And I know you do a lot of stuff with like contrasting weighted sprints with chains and different things like that.
Yeah, so if I'm looking from 10 to 20, how am I going to improve 10 to 20? It really depends on the player and where they are. It's still now technically it's not strength oriented. Once you get past the first 2-3 steps, it's no more strength. But it is still. There is still some strength work that can occur. That to improve the 20s, I really like resisted sprints. Resisted sprints are hills. You know, hills are great for 10 and for 20s. They really are. The chains, for resisted sprints, I love using chains, and we also have like a machine that measures and adds resistance as well. So that's very useful for consistent speed. Nick.
Oh, the Exergenie.
The Exergenie, yeah. The Exergenie's a useful tool to have as well. And essentially what it comes down to is limb velocity, right? And peak velocity at each step and ground contact times. So you see what the ground contact time is at what step. And if you actually, Ryan explains this so well. I loved this, where he says acceleration should be a like it should be one
Ever
step.
since that episode, I use that cue. It works.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start seeing the one step that plateaus, that step that doesn't fall in line with the natural progression of acceleration, and that takes a coaching eye, and that also takes, for most people, it'll take technology. Wherever that metric is, whatever meters per second are, whatever that force output is, that's what you need to replicate in order to improve. So there's a point where you're just essentially peaking at whatever meters per second until you don't anymore. Is it positional? Is it fascial? Which, is that bullshit, right? Like, how can I, is it positional? Is it structural, right? Whether it's tendons, ligaments, bones, musculature, connective tissues. Is it skill, right? Is it just a matter of understanding where you have to be? So we'd have to understand what the limiting factor is from the 10 to the 20. And by the way, this is why I don't do any online programming. Like I refuse. I could be making thousands of dollars a month doing online programming because it's not up to par with like what I need to do. We don't do any online programming for athletes. None. Zero. So it all depends on what needs to be considered, what needs to be done for that athlete at that time. If you're still having that constant build, then it's just exposure. Then we just need to keep practicing and doing what we're doing. But if there's some kind of asymmetry, or it's asynchronous, it's out of rhythm, right? Like, then we work on that gap and that gap only. Now, how do we expose them to that? We could expose it to, with tempos. We could expose them because 10 to 20, you'll hit, what is it, 84% of max speed or 80% of max speed by 20 yards. Does that sound right?
That does. I forget, like Les Spellman has all those things set up, and that sounds about right.
So what do you do to mimic those velocities? How do you get to those velocities and those similar angles? How do you mimic the angles and the velocities, which will then mimic ground contact times, hopefully, and force outputs? And then you expose yourself constantly and constantly and constantly until the adaptation. And it takes time.
It
Could take
does.
a week, could take a month, could take 2 months, could take 3 months. I just finished a podcast with Randy Huntington. He speaks in years.
Yeah.
He says if I just had another year, I had 3 with him. If I had one more year with him, we really could have done, like, one more year. Holy shit. Like, I can't see, how many strength coaches get guys more than 14 weeks? You
And even
know,
if you're doing 14 weeks with all their schedules and stuff, you might, yeah, that it's not like they're in 5 days every week for as long as you need them to be in. Yeah.
Charlie Francis used to talk about taking something like 18 weeks to build work capacity. Like, what the fuck? Like, just to build work capacity. And that's all I got guys for. If I'm lucky, I get them 18, 26. If
Yeah.
my pro baseball guys, I would have them, in an ideal world, I'll have them for 20 weeks. In actuality, I'll have them for like 12, 16. Best case. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, like, if Charlie's spending 18 weeks just building work capacity, how am I going to do any sport specificity with these guys? It takes a lot of work to do things, and a lot of exposures and a lot of time and a long time for adaptation. I think that's something that it's just, how are you to improve a certain ability? How are you going to expose them to that ability, either submaximally or maximally or adequately, to yield the adaptation?
You still sprint yourself?
Yeah.
What do you usually like? I guess like is your I'm saying this as a 39-year-old. I think you're in your late 30s. My goal is to just drop off as little as possible every year now. And if I can improve, there's like one, or I don't know about you, I have like 2, maybe 3 days a year where I'm like, I am feeling it today. I got to test, like bring out the timing system.
Yeah, no. So I'm an idiot. Um, and I used to be real fast. Like, I ran a 6.5. So, like,
Moving. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think I was like a sub 4.5 40 guy, like a 4.49 hand time type guy. Um, so I'll never be what I was. Like, I'm content with that. And as I think, for me, as just the old guy now, to be able to do the ability at maximal effort is enough. I think my fastest 10 split, which I really don't even time anymore. I haven't timed it in years, like maybe 2 years, 3 years, was like a 0.95 or a 0.96. Like, it's okay. It's whatever. And I think my fastest miles per hour, meters per second. Oh, shit. Meters per second, I think in like 20 yards or 20 meters, I think I hit like maybe 7.5 meters per second or some shit like that. I forget. But, like, I don't care about my own training. I really don't. I like look good naked, and still be able to do basic stuff. And if someone cuts me off, I still need to be able to choke a motherfucker.
That's right. The other thing too is like I feel like I gotta at least move well enough that I can still compete with the people that I train for the most part. They want to play spike ball, great. I'll crush you in spike ball. Still, yeah. They want to do whatever, great. Bring it on.
You know, it's funny. uh, I've never really felt compelled to compete against my guys. That's a lie. There's a couple of young pitchers that have come in that are like, dude, you give 10 at bats, I'll strike you out 10 times. Like, yo, motherfucker, you have no idea who you're talking to. Like, that'll come out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, but other than that, and at the end of the day, I still don't compete with them because I know they're not striking me out 10 times. I know they're not striking me out 5 times out of 10, no matter how good they are. So like now it's just me trying to prove something to myself. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to fuck with their egos, before season just to prove something to myself, just to be like, fuck you. So I've like backed out of a couple of them. But it's funny. I what I've noticed is a lot of guys that didn't didn't leave it all out there. I left it all out there. I have zero regrets as far as work ethic is concerned. You know, I literally gave it everything that I had. I played my last year with a torn shoulder that every time I swung and missed, my shoulder would dislocate, and I couldn't have less interest in competing with people physically. I could not care less. Oh yeah, cool, bro, whatever. Like, it's fine. Occasionally it'll come out. And I've noticed a lot of my friends that were like, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. They still like just the slightest bit. If they left that little bit in the tank, they still got to compete somewhere somehow.
Yeah.
I have noticed that.
I heard it was like this was probably like 6 or 7 years ago, but training was like a U18 hockey team. And this one kid was like, I know I can outbench you. And we were maxing out. And I'm like, bring it on. Let's do it.
Yeah.
The whole room got so hyped. Like they loved that. But so I think a good rule is you don't actually compete in any sport that they're actually playing because, like you said, you don't want to hurt their ego because it's
Yeah.
not good either way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And for me, it was the baseball shit, bro. Like when these guys are talking shit, like, bro, I'll fucking put your lights out. You kidding me? the yeah, like I've shoved him, like, the Bill Burr skit, like I just fucking
Yes.
press him down, like shove him down, like he's in there though. Like that, the maniac is still there. Like every now and then, like I just get the itch, but no, it's I do everything I can to hide that person.
Mike, this conversation's been this flew by. I want to respect your time. So tell people where they can find you. I know you're posting a lot more. You have an awesome podcast, by the way, and I'm so glad you brought it back. So I so I had subscribed and I would like, update like anything new. And then one day it came back. I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Bro, so when I started the podcast, Brooker and I weren't sure what we really wanted out of it. We just knew that we had cool conversations that people said they wanted to hear, so we shared them. And then we're like, well, we know cool people, so let's just have cool conversations with them. And now it's like, well, I don't plan on making money off my podcast. I don't plan on selling anything online. And I don't plan on, making money online. I plan on making money in my brick and mortar. So everything is literally for everyone else. So this is me being selfish in one regard where I'm only interviewing people that I want to learn from. And then it's also like the damn path, life's a circle, like try to help as many coaches, like sort of thing.
It goes both ways. Honestly, like I probably learned more from podcasts than any other form because like someone I respect will mention a name and then I'll look up that person.
Mm-hmm.
They'll mention a name. I'll look up that person. And before you know it, like you learned a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I really like it. And people, it's not for everyone. It's interesting. A lot of the podcast stuff, like we have a decent amount of downloads on the podcast, but not nearly as many as we have interact with clips of the podcast on social media.
Mm.
So the social media is to help people. Like I need to create content that will help people find me so they can find the long form content and really get education. You know what I mean? Like that's like my goal of my social media presence is just to like, hey, let you know I'm here. So if you want the education, if you want more out of me or my network, you go to the podcast or like hopefully I have some other things that people can see and it all be my goal is to have everything be as free as possible, without it. And that way, I'm a trusted source. I'm not trying to make any money off people. Like, and not to
Yeah.
say like, oh, making money off people is bad. Nothing like that. But I have no other interest than sharing and trying to grow.
It's awesome. Thank you again, Mike.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for having me on.